sustainable business models, the area of the world that will be struck first by the climate change, and that is the poles and Arctic in the Norwegian context. I'm just gonna give you sort of a general introduction first to the work we're doing in UN Global Compact and what is sustainability about, and then gonna say a couple of words about the Arctic as well, and then happy to have, to just have a discussion and open dialogue also along the way. So just put up your hand. I don't think we have that many people, so I will see when you are raising your hand, and it will also give us more opportunities to talk to each other when we are a smaller group. So that's actually better than a different situation, right? So I'm just going to see if I can share the screen. Give me a sec. Okay, good. Okay. Then okay. So what is the UN Global Compact that I'm representing about, and what is sustainability about? So on a very sort of overall big picture thing, UN Global Compact is the UN Organization for Sustainable Business. It's also at the same time, as we have a headquarters in New York and offices around the world, we also are a hybrid. So we have companies as members, and they constitute the board I'm reporting to here in Norway, and national boards around the world, and of course also the global board of the UN Global Compact. 13,000 companies and SMEs, and in the Norwegian context we have 300 members, but that's like 30 of the 40 largest companies: Norwegian Oil Fund, Norwegian Business Association, etc. So where did the UN Global Compact start? So I mean, today it's perhaps let's say or 20 years ago, it was relatively radical that a company should do anything else than ensuring jobs for their employees, jobs and salaries for their employees. But Kofi Annan, he said that we need to create the largest movement in the world of companies to take what was back then called responsibility, corporate social responsibility forward. Today we are calling it sustainability and responsible business, right? But that was the background of Kofi Annan when he launched UN Global Compact, the movement, which is now the largest movement for business, sustainable business in the world, 20 years back. But of course, before that, in 1987, the Norwegian Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland launched the Brundtland Report that sort of set up the steps or the definition of what is sustainability. And today we are looking at sustainability, the definition as you may be well aware of, economic, social, and of course, climate, green sustainability. But how do we get from this sort of overall 17 SDGs and the sort of overall sustainability definition to what companies actually do? And that is basically what we are doing at the UN Global Compact. So when we have two sets of principles, if you want, or guiding stars that all our companies are working with, and that they're also reporting on. So you see there is some 4 areas here that are the 4 main areas of the UN Global Compact 10 principles on responsible business, and that are, not surprisingly, it's human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. So every year UN Global Compact companies have to, on one side, report on them, and on the other side they are also reporting or showing what they're doing on the Sustainable Development Goals. What are they contributing to? But then still, it's quite, it's quite overall, and not that clear to handle, I guess. We can look at business from, if you try to simplify it, like the Norwegian Business School, NHH, has done. They put the two professors, Jørgensen and Pedersen, they in their definition of a responsible and sustainable business, they're saying that there is a shadow side and there is a sunny side. On the shadow side, you have all the negative footprint a company could have. For example, the value chain, if you have child labor, if the people don't get enough salaries, or if there's emissions influence on the agriculture around the fabric, etc. All the challenging pieces and opportunities that are in the SDGs. So that is what we're calling the shadow side, that all companies need to be responsible for, report annually on that. But then, of course, we have the win-win situation, where we have the sunny side, where you can see the SDGs and the Paris Agreement as a business opportunity. So we could say that the Sustainable Development Goals are the largest business opportunity of our time. And how can I say that? Why we can say that is because the 17 goals are obviously the first time ever that all leaders in the world come together and define goals for all the countries in the world. There was some goals before that, but they were only for the global south, right? So what we are seeing here is that basically summed up all the challenges and problems the world has in 17 goals. And what do companies do? They solve problems for people. So that is why the SDGs is the largest business opportunity over time, because it sums up all the, we need cars without emission. We need one way to store carbon in order to reduce the emissions or the CO2 in the atmosphere. We need new ways of recycling, etc. So there's a lot of opportunities. We are working on both these streams, and they are both also extremely important for the Arctic, and I will come back to that. And then some Norwegian companies, and global here on this slide, the global companies, they also think it's quite difficult to work on all the 17 goals. So they have decided, many of them have done an analytical review of which of these goals should we work specifically with and report on. So in this UN Global Compact Progress Report that comes every year from last year, 1,500 companies were asked, all of them members of the UN Global Compact. As you can see, some goals are obvious, right? Like to work on economic growth, not so strange at all that a lot of the most companies work on that. Perhaps a very positive thing is that we see that gender equality is also very high on the agenda. Surprisingly, perhaps we see that climate action is a bit lower, but that depends, of course, also on what sort of industry you are in. But this is just to show you that, for example, that if you look at to the right on your screen, you see that the goal 14, life below water, very, very few companies in the big picture. But in Norwegian context, that number is much higher, of course, since we have so many ocean industries. In the Norwegian context, we also see there are also been done PwC Sustainability 100. It's the 100 largest companies in Norway that every second year is participating in a survey and follow up by PwC. And you see also here that the decent work and economic growth, number 8 is of course very high on the agenda. 13 climate, obviously. But you also see that there's a difference, for example, in services in the retail sector. Basically, you see that there is a lot of focus also on other areas like global health and equality as well. But so there is a tendency to try to pick and choose. It's not always so easy to do that when you're entering into business opportunities, because business opportunities doesn't say I'm a goal. They say where can I get, where can I earn money? So for example, if you look at circular opportunity, there is now the world is 91% non-circular. It means that it's only 9% of all the things you see in the room you're sitting now has been used more than one time. Only 9%. So you can just look around you. And there has also been made a gap report like that on the Norwegian context, and it's a bit disputed, that report, but still it says that Norway is only 2% circular, so much less than the world average. Of course, today only 2% of all the food in the world comes from ocean. Norway is a huge, one of the largest exporters of fish or seafood in the world. Norway is also the fourth largest merchant fleet in the world. We need to move things around the world, and Norway could take, there is a need for new ships on that are more sustainable and more green. You see the global offshore opportunity is huge, 15 times what we have today until 2040. You have most likely all also tried out car sharing opportunities, and you see that every year now it increases by 20% every year until 2022 in those numbers. And of course, the carbon capture and storage is a huge opportunity for Norway as well, and a necessity in order to take in, use the old caves where there used to be gas in the North Sea. They can now be used for storing CO2. These are just some examples, but there are tons of examples like this, and there are also many more small opportunities because they are obviously large industrial opportunities you see here. But everything from for example, food waste is another one, where in the goal 12.3 in the circular SDG, there is a specific target saying that we should halve the amount of food waste. And for example, in NHO, where we have our offices in Norwegian Business Association, the canteen has reduced their waste by 50%. At the same time, and this was pre-corona numbers, at the same time they have actually reduced their cost by 20%. So they have both reduced the garbage and at the same time reduced cost. So that's really a sunny side of the sustainability thing, right? Perhaps a couple on just very brief on what are the trends in the Norwegian business, and I think it's very much an international trend as well. So the Norwegian Business Association have done a roadmap on what that they call the future of business, Fremtidens Næringsliv, and they say that they see 4 clear trends. Obviously, it's a greener economy in the way ahead, but as Corona has showed us that sustainability is not only about the green, it's also about health, for example. Very clearly, we have seen the big challenges we have in the area of health, vaccines, and the need for more industry connected and research connected to health. But it's also a more digital economy, right? So, and I think Corona has also underlined that need. And I think we all had that sort of experience of having problems with a Skype call until now that we are all sharing this, this digital room today. We are also expecting a much more service-based economy, and of course that means that we are going from owning to renting. For example, being into the car, you rent the car for a day, or it could also be that you're renting lights, right? You have a company that comes to your office and changes the light bulbs and the lamps, but you don't buy the lamps. And I think that is just a few examples, but there's so much more examples of services that you now can rent instead of buying the physical product as such. And of course, especially from the Norwegian side, we see an increasingly more international economy. The challenge for Norway is, of course, that the oil sector has been very much taking over the control basically on Norwegian export, dominating it, and we need to get back to more other kinds of export as well, next to seafood, oil and gas, and energy, and of course aluminium and wood, that are some of the largest natural resources that Norway are exporting. Just to give you an example, so then the Business Association has looked at some of the opportunities, and you can see here some of the examples: hydrogen, batteries, ocean wind, maritime opportunities. And if you look at in the short run, you see that global renewable actors, they are leading ahead. But if you and hydrogen is also only out of the running field. But if you look sort of further ahead, you see that batteries are also increasing the potential. I think this is what we are seeing, and we need to create industries that are green and renewable and sustainable. And that is not least that's not least the reality in the Arctic. So I think most of us don't really have a sort of relationship with the poles. Like that's something that you're not, you don't go to the pole to visit it, you don't the North Pole or South Pole, you don't go to the Arctic really, and there are few people living there. In the Antarctica, there's nobody living really. So why is this important for us, and why is it important for Norway? Obviously, since Norway is the closest you get to the pole, because on the southern hemisphere it's not so close from the continent to Antarctica. The biggest challenge we face is that the climate changes will give global warming first around the poles. So while we will see perhaps an increase of 2-3 degrees in the sort of medium expected scenario from the UN, if you don't manage to turn it around, we will see the double around the poles. So you will see up to 5 degrees. That's what the climate panel says. And you can just imagine, we already see now the effects of the current global warming, which is much lower. So you can just imagine how this will affect the northern part of Norway, for example. But then, of course, again, does it really influence the rest of the world? Of course, there's discussions about how high will the sea level rise due to this sort of melting of the ice. And of course, a huge challenge. Different kinds of proposals around that, how high it will be, and the climate panel has of course come with some estimates. But in the short run, and for the Norwegian context, it's a geopolitical question that I think too few people know and thinks about, and that Norwegians need to think much more about, both on the political level in government, but also on research. And that is the fact that we are seeing a melting ice in the Northeast Passage. So that is the passage that goes over Russia to Asia. So you go from Europe over Norway, Russia, eventually you get down to Korea and China, Japan on the other side. And if you compare that with the Suez Channel, which is now the way to get to the quickest way to get to Asia from Europe, it takes around 1 to 2 weeks less. If you travel without any problems, it takes much less time. So the kilometers and the amount of time traveling is much shorter. However, of course, there's a lot of challenges yet, because the ice is only melted 3 months a year. It varies, of course, from year to year. The estimates is that it will be relatively ice-free around 2030. There is no insurance company, almost no insurance company that would support, will insure your vessel to go that way. You also have challenges with rescue. What happens if, and there has, every year there is some up to 100 ships that are traveling through the Northeast Passage, or the Northern Sea Route, that is also called. But this just shows what happens at the moment that you can go quicker to Europe via this, and also especially now that we've seen challenge in the Suez Canal as well. So this is a huge issue, and it doesn't only have to be merchant fleets, right? It cannot be military ships, but it's so it's a geopolitical question. But of course, I think I'm not going to go deeper into that. But if you look at it from business perspective, the first thing people will ask you if you have the UN in the name of your organization, you go to northern Norway, and they're asking you if you're coming to protect the Arctic. And I said, I'm coming here because of business opportunity. But of course, we also want to protect the nature. And the reason for that is because the UN has, for a big extent, naturally talked about protecting the environment, about the melting ice, which is the sort of, the symbol of the climate change we are facing. But I mean, we can't do either or, right? We need to do both. We need to make sure that if the ice is melting, then of course you should look at what are the sunny side sustainability opportunities. I'm not saying that we necessarily should drill for oil in the Barents Sea, but what are the opportunities for Norwegian companies and Russian companies, for that sake, and others, to do sustainable business along that road? And that's exactly what the Arctic people living in the Arctic want to hear, because they understand that they can't stop doing everything. They can't be zero emission people in themselves. They will always need to get food coming up there, or they will need to do transport. But of course, then you have to compensate for that in another way, right? So these are some of the sort of discussion between protection and business opportunity in the high north is important area. But if you want to read about one area of a new area, if you haven't, is the Northeast Passage and everything that happens around the pole now, because you will see that of course China, India, and the US are increasingly interested. China is looking at it as a part of the Belt and Road initiative on the Silk Road, or the new Silk Road, and it's a lot of opportunities for good cooperation with the Chinese and the Americans and the Indians and the Koreans, but it's obviously also a lot of challenges, as there is always when you go to these sort of areas of the world where the nature has been protected. I mean, this is one of the places where Norway and Russia has together been handling the cod stock in a very successful manner. So it's not overfished, which is impressingly itself during also the time of communism and afterwards. So it means that it's possible to cooperate along the sort of traditional frontiers of and borders. So I think this is, I will end here, and happy to have discussion, questions, your views, criticism, comments, and whatever it should be. But I think this is at least my starting point, and then let's have a dialogue. So back to you, Emina or Pascal.
Yes, so if anyone has a question or a remark, you're very welcome to either unmute yourself or write in the chat. Let's give a couple of minutes for you to kind of assess if you have anything to ask him. And then if not, then we will proceed to a closing space, and we're asking for feedback about today's session.
Hi, Anastasia.
Hi. I was listening throughout the whole presentation, and since I have been working on several projects that involve the SDG, I wonder, what is the most important SDG for you personally?
Me personally, it would of course be the 117 partnership, because as a UN organization, our role is to not to choose necessarily a goal. And then, I mean, basically it's 16 goals and the 17 is partnership, right? So when I'm saying that, of course, that is a bit, it's a sort of easy way to get around your question, but at the same time, it's true. Like, we have members that work on ocean, members that work on pharmacies, all over the place. But I think one of the goals that is especially important to Norway now, I think, is number 12, the one on responsible production and consume. I mean, obviously also 13 on climate, but there's a lot of focus on that now. And if you look at the Nordics in sort of an overview of the SDGs, where are the problems, you will see that the Nordics come pretty good out on, doing quite well on most of the goals, from inequality to equality to health, education, etc. But if you start looking at the numbers on circularity, on the amount of waste that Nordic and Norway represent, it's very high numbers. And I must say that it's fascinating, because I mean, and this is most likely also a generational thing, right? So when we started office in UN Global Compact Norway, I felt that in a way. I mean, I was not conscious enough myself about recycling. And our communication director, Pernille, she's 24, I guess. And she just said, okay, we need to have, I will buy my phone in Finn. No, she wanted to buy a used phone. I was like, okay, yes, good, very good idea. And then I have a background selling used furniture. So I realized that, we need to have used office, furniture. But Pernille just said everything, everything needs to be used. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And it's not that difficult, but just the conscience about that in Norway is so low, and also in other countries, some countries, it's still very much, old stuff is throwaway, and that's changing a bit here now. But I think this is an important thing, this is really an important thing for Norway. So that's also one of my favorite goals, if I can say that. But definitely the partnership is the key, I think.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Kim. So recently, Norway approved the carbon capture longship project. Could you tell us what it's about and how this could impact?
Just give me 1 second. I'm just going to ask my colleagues here at home to turn down the volume a bit. Is that okay?
Okay.
Sorry about that. No, I didn't hear your question, Pascal. That's why. So can you please repeat it?
Okay. Norway recently approved the multi-stakeholder carbon capture longship project. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what impact this would have on the objectives of the United Nations Global Compact?
Yes, I think you talk about the longship, are you? That was in the Norwegian climate bill plan. Actually, I'm not an expert on carbon capture, but I just before this meeting I'm the podcast host of Future of Business, and we had carbon capture on the program today. So, minutes the cement production in Norway is 4 to 7% of the emissions, I think, and a huge part of that is being done in the work that is related to longship, to this. And it is, of course, a sort of a value chain of how to store carbon, and how to, the Northern Lights is another part of the value chain where you pump CO2 from the CO2 from industries. You pump them into the old gas wells of Norway that are now empty because they have been emptied for gas, right? So the whole idea of capturing emissions of cement production is really important in order to get down the emissions. And it's not only concretely in the Norwegian context, but if you look at all the emissions from construction sector in the world, that constitutes 40%. So usually when you hear carbon capture, you think about oil and gas, right? That's very typical. But the building sector, if you include both the heating and the construction, cement and all of that, then it's a huge part of it. So if you can manage to have a CO2 carbon storage and capture, and have the whole value chain connected from the cement fabric in the concrete fabric in Breivik, and then bring that CO2 into the ocean and put it down to the ground, so to speak. I'm talking, as you can hear, as not an expert, as a very sort of basic person in this, but I think it's fascinating, and I think it's great that the Norwegian government has, and the whole parliament has agreed to do this, right? So it's both sort of the whole idea, and then also to, you know, the end station of the work. Having said that, Aker Carbon Capture, which was the company I was talking to the other day, she also stressed the importance of other work they're doing that is not financed of the state budget. For example, they are now entering into a dialogue or a MOU, memorandum of referendum, on together with Microsoft and Ørsted. Ørsted is the Danish Equinor, so to speak, but they're just much greener. They have changed to renewables to a very big extent. And you know why Microsoft, for example? It's of course that they have a huge use of energy due to the storage in, the data and all the challenge with that we are becoming more and more aware of, the need of energy to store data and to keep up the cloud working, right? So these are, I think that it's a huge opportunity for Norway, especially because Norway has, even though it doesn't sound like it, Norway has had we talk about carbon capture and storage. Sounds like something new, but Norway has done this on I mean, it was basically a failure, right, on Mongstad, but then it has been done, for example, on Sleipner on the platform. It has been done for a very long time. So Norway has putting the carbon back again in the hole, basically in the ground, and it's not like you put it down in the same hole that it came out of. So you have to drill a new well to put the carbon, the CO2 back again, but it's a fascinating thing to do. And I think the next step, I asked the guests about what is the next step, and they said we need to establish a market for negative emissions. So, you know, how can you trade? Now you have the quotas for climate emissions, but how can you set up a good mechanism where you can trade, you can pay for putting emission into some, like you buy basically the right to put the CO2 you have into the ground, and that's much more concrete, of course, than having a quota that you can buy without having the whole value chain in place. So it's a very interesting area. I don't know enough about it, Pascal, but that was at least some reflections.
Very comprehensive. Thank you.
I think there were perhaps some questions in the chat, I think I saw. Does the UNGC support other businesses by providing them with capital investments? Very much a relevant question. And I think all finance is key, right? So if you're going to get the change, if you're going to see the green change that we're talking about, how do we, or the sustainable one, how do we ensure that? And first of all, we need the authorities, right? They need to regulate it better and differently. We need the consumer to buy the right stuff, right? Use their power. But then not least, we need finance, and of course the company itself. But what finance is asking for is what happens in a way, right? So we know, for example, that carbon storage and capture hasn't been that on the agenda in the US. That's very much changing now due to the big investors. Whether we should we do investments ourselves? I don't think so. I think we, as the UN Global Compact, we have the role to support our members, the 13,000 businesses and 4,000 organizations, to get on the right track. What we could do is that we could bring companies and or investors together. So, for example, what we are doing is, in the Norwegian context, is that we are setting up an ocean lab together with all the largest investors in Norway, which I unfortunately can't tell you about yet, but at some point it will be more public. And what we're doing there is that we're trying to get, the challenges that is needed. And if Kongsberg or Equinor or anyone says we need this solution, we can pair them with smaller solution companies or find solutions that are already on the market or develop them. And then, of course, bring into that ocean lab, bring in this potential investor, but also other investors that we would like to get into the ocean lab. So in that sense, it would be a way of perhaps giving capital, but we are not an investor. We are not a finance institution. We are certainly the UN, and we should, build an ecosystem for reaching the goals, but not sort of take part in the capitalist investments directly, I think. And the second question is, do you think the idea of circular economies will be beneficial in achieving the European Green Deal? Absolutely. I mean, the EU Green Deal has its own circular strategy with quite tough goals and direction for the countries of in Europe, but also in addition you have several countries that already have their own circular national strategy. Norway is hopefully getting on before the summer. The government has proposed that, but Finland, for example, have already that in the Nordic space. The Netherlands is just amazing when it comes to circular economy. You should just look up what Rotterdam is doing, for example, on most likely the most circular city in the world, at least what I've heard about it, at least amongst them. It's quite, everything is planned out from a circular way of thinking. And also, do you have a new way of thinking about, what I talked about earlier, that you don't buy something and then you stay with it for your whole life. The new circular passport for the construction industry that the Dutch have invented, I think, at least they are using it, is that you build a new building, and in that passport you make an overview of the whole building of the construction material. So when you're going to take that construction or that building apart, you can just take out the pieces and put it into a new building. So you're basically not, you are perhaps owning the material, but you make sure that it's circular. So I mean, in a new world, perhaps you could rent the materials for 50 years, and then you can reuse them in another building. And this is the way to go, right? Whether UN Global Compact, what sort of role we play? I mean, in the Norwegian context, which is obviously where I operate most of the time, we have an action platform for circular business models, or carbon neutral and circular business models, where we have brought 30 companies and organizations together. Then we have some of the large organizations in Norway, businesses in Norway there. For example, Schibsted, the owner of Finn, but that is also owner of a lot of other things. We have Kongsberg, we have had Posten, the Norwegian Post, many Orkla, which is the provider of a lot of food to grocery stores in Norway. So a lot of big actors. And if we can just, if you just can make sure that one of these actors do a small tweak, that will mean a lot. If Orkla changes the way they are doing their logistics on just 2-3 items, that will potentially mean a lot. So this is like our role is to try to bring companies together and push them in the right direction. Then, of course, that differs from each country to another country, how the UN Global Compact local network, as they call us, are working. But we are, as everybody else, I guess, in the world, we are also in the stakeholder world, we are also trying to, influence the politicians in Norway and in the EU and other places to be even more forward-leaning and to take the EU Green Deal into each of the countries is extremely important, and that will take time. But Norway is also affected by that, and now we see, for example, that Norwegian Parliament is voting soon on a new law on financial reporting. So it means that all financial actors basically have to report, and then they, of course, have to ask the companies they invest in how they are taking care of the environment, of business and human rights, labor laws, and anti-corruption. So it starts on the top, but it will then sort of piece for piece go down to the everyday life of the companies.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question that they would like to ask while we're still here? If yes, please feel free to unmute or write in the chat. We see that Stephanie is very happy and satisfied with the answer.
Thanks. I think perhaps there was one more question from you, Stephanie, or just saw you put up your hand.
Yes, I have a question. Out of curiosity. Okay, so out of curiosity, I'm wondering, is the UNGC active in the Global South? Because I'm actually learning about this organization today. I don't think I've actively come across it before. In fact, I was very curious when I saw that today's meeting is about the UNGC. I was very curious. Is it active in the Global South? Because you've talked a lot about the work of the UNGC in Europe. So I'm just curious, is there anything unique happening in the Global South, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Asia, anything interesting happening, or a project I could look into as well?
Yeah, absolutely, there is. Let me just start out saying most people have heard about UNICEF, perhaps UNDP. You heard about the really big program organizations of the UN. With I used to work in the headquarters of UNICEF in New York. There were 3,000 people working there, and if you went to UNEP in Nairobi, it's the same size. So it's UN Global Compact is a networking organization, and we have a relatively small headquarters with around 150 people in New York. It's also a young organization, 20 years old, and it was started basically from Western companies, whatever we call them today. In Europe and US, Nordic companies being one of them, very active after Kofi Annan took the initiative originally. Today, however, we see that 50% of all new members are joining in the Global East, Global South, so in low and middle income countries. So that's a very positive trend, and we also, since 2018, they changed the organizational business model of UN Global Compact. So it means, for example, that before 2019, where I was the first employee, now we are around 20 people in the Norwegian office. There was not a Finnish, not a Norwegian, not a Swedish office. So it's not only in Africa that they haven't heard about us, if you see, right? Like or whatever, Asia, because in Norway nobody had heard about us either. But I think we are growing a lot. We went from 110 members to 300 members. We are trending, of course, because everybody wants to do something on sustainable finance and business these days. For the moment, I think there are in Africa, I think there are 13 local networks, and they have opened. South Africa, for example, is it's very well established, been there much longer than we have been in Norway. But Ghana is new, Kenya is quite new, Nigeria is also brand new. So just like we are new in the Nordics, we're also new in Africa. In Asia, both Korea and Japan has been active for a very long time. China has the last couple of years been much more active. So that's, you also see a trend that it's not only in traditionally as it is in Europe with the sustainable and green business, you also see a very clear trend now in the US and also in Asia and Africa. You know, it's on a different scale, it's a different sort of opportunity, some leapfrogging in Africa and a jump, you know, over many of the on the steps of development and straight into renewables, for example. So I think there's a lot of things going on. And next time, where are you from, Stephanie?
I'm from Kenya.
I'm from Kenya. So next time you go to Kenya, let me know, and I'll set you up with the executive director there if she has time, or one of her colleagues. So there is a much more going on now. Just she started, I think, a year before me or something. So it's also, and there has been a lot of digital activity now in all these countries, of course, during the corona, because you know what else. So yes, so that's the reason why we haven't heard that much about us. But it will be changing to a big extent, I think. We went from, when I arrived, it was a bit less than around 9,500 members, business members. Now it crossed 13,000. So in just 1.5 years, we have increased by 4,000 members across the world. So that's 2,000 of them in the low and middle income countries. That's, I think, great. It's a very low number, right? We have some 100,000 something companies in Norway if you include everything. So you can just imagine how many they have in Nigeria. You know? So, but still, it's the largest business movement in the world, even though it's only 13,000 businesses. So,
I'm quite impressed. I really didn't know about this UN body. It's quite impressive what you're doing.
I think when we can show the results, we can use words as impressing. But for now, I think we are still on. You know, we are building up. Just the question like, what are you doing on circular? You know, on the circular issues. Like, I don't know what the others are doing in UN Global Compact. Most likely not doing enough. But it's a start. You know, you have to start somewhere. You can't do everything at the same time. So. Okay.
There's also some questions in the chat box still, if you have time.
What in the forum or?
No, here right after the forum, Anastasia asked a question. Does United Nations? Yes, found it.
Yes, we do. We do have international. So the UN Global Compact in Norway, we do have internships. We have an agreement with some universities. So we are working with the Norwegian Business School, so NHH in Bergen. We are working with University of Bergen and also with BI. All of these three have a formalized agreement with us, so we receive interns from there. But we are also open to other interns. But since we usually get enough interns from NHH and BI, international students, we haven't announced any internship positions. However, as you know, there are very few international students in Norway for the moment. So we are actually looking at, we actually would like to have interns candidates. So if you have any names or if yourself are a candidate, feel free to send me I can put my email in the feel free to apply or just send your CV, and then if it's not me it's one of my colleagues, the head of our outreach and members team that will contact you if it's if it's of interest of what we're looking for. So we are looking for especially people to work with companies organizing activities, if people have marketing skills as a background. So it's it's in a way it's a good place if people want to apply now. It's a good time because we usually we get 15-20 candidates from NHH. This time we got 4, and we are going to have 2, right? So I'm not sure if we're gonna have so don't hesitate to reach out to us if any of you are interested. The only thing we set as a criteria is that you're enrolled in studies at the moment, because we don't pay any economical support. So the way we do it is either if it's obligatory internship, that give you study credits, or we combine it in, for example, 50% position or 40% position at the same time as you're in your studies.
Wonderful. Thank you for the information. It really means a lot.